What's up, party people? It's Keys Dan with RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com, coming to you live and in living color from the Radio What studios. And this is my podcast, What Makes You Famous? It's an extension of the RadioWhat.com internet radio station that I've been running for quite some time. And if you need DJ services, where do I always send you? DJLittleRock.com. One more time, DJLittleRock.com. Check availability and get a free price quote. And maybe you can have me at your next event. You know I like to party with the people. The people need to be entertained. Are you not entertained? Let me entertain you. All right, I'll stop singing. Today on the program, I have Murray MJ Blehart. Yes, who is that? What? You don't know? You're going to find out in the next few minutes, so stick around. This week's shows. On Thursday, I have two public shows this week. On Thursday, I will be at the Old Post Barbecue in Russellville, Arkansas from 6 to 9 for the video dance party, karaoke jam. Yeah, I said karaoke. You're the stars of the show at the Old Post Barbecue from 6 to 9. And yes, I said barbecue as well. It's family friendly. They got the best tasting barbecue, and they got frosty beverages for the adults, just in case you care to imbibe. But I do keep the music family friendly, PG, GPG, so bring everybody out to the Old Post Barbecue on Thursday night from 6 to 9. Then on Friday, we get down on Friday at the Rab in Conway, Arkansas from 8 p.m. until 12:30 in the AM. Now, this one is an over 21 bar, but I thought Conway was in a dry county. Yeah, we got the alcoholics to prove it. It's a private club. That's how they get away with things. At the Rab, R-A-B, spelled backwards, B-A-R. But you're not supposed to have a sign that says bar in that dry county. Yeah, R-A-B, but if you look at it in your rearview mirror, it says B-A-R. They're so clever. They got a full bar, kitchen's open. They got some good food over there, too. I like the chicken wings myself, but they got good burgers and good pizza. And then they have pool tables, 10 diamond-style pool tables at the Rab in Conway, Arkansas. They have a pool tournament on Friday night, so if you want to try to make some money playing pool, you can do so while you're waiting to sing on stage right next to me with the video dance party karaoke jam. So Thursday at the Old Post Barbecue from 6 to 9 in Russellville, Arkansas, or Friday night at the Rab in Conway, Arkansas from 8 till 12:30 in the AM. Yeah, be there. Two great shows. And then on Saturday, it's Saturday I have a wedding. So unless you're invited, you cannot come. The only reason I mention it is because I'm so excited. Weddings are coming back. I got at least 3 weddings a month for the next couple of months, and I think I got 4 weddings for the few months after. Oh, it's just they're starting to come back, and I'm so excited about that. I get to entertain the people. Speaking of entertaining the people, let's get into it with Murray MJ Blehart. I got him on the Skype, so if you're listening to the audio version, I encourage you to check out the video version, youtube.com/user/KeysDan. Skyping Murray MJ Blehart now. Almost got it. There he is. Murray Blehart in the house. What's up, man?
Technical difficulties.
Nah, there's no such thing as technical difficulties. You're smarter than the machine. I knew you could do it, man. You're a podcaster. You're a writer. You got all these things under your belt. I thought I had a lot of websites. You got a ton of websites, man. Where do we start first? You dip your fingers in a lot of things, and that's what people have to do in this world to get by, to thrive and survive, and to keep your brain functioning properly. Because, if I was just doing one thing, if I was just podcasting, it would probably drive me crazy. Although I do like talking to people, and I'm excited about talking to you, Murray Blehart. And thank you for the pronunciation key in the text earlier. I want to let people know that I did not come up with that pronunciation all on my own. You had to guide me. You guide me.
So It's one of those names people get wrong on a regular basis, so I'm kind of used to that being a thing.
Oh, I believe it to be true, man. I picked Keys Dan as my stage name, and whenever I say, "Hey, go to keysdan.com," they go, K-E-Z? Is there a Z in there? Is there a P? No. Like the Florida Keys, where I'm from, the Florida Keys, and short for Daniel. See, that's how you brand things. But Blehart, man, you got a name. You got stuff that comes under your name. If you Google Murray Blehart, you're going to come up with a ton of stuff. And me, I like to go fresh into things. I didn't want to look too much, but I did see that you have a lot of websites. But give the people an idea of who you are.
Well, I am a lot of things. I'm a writer first and foremost. I have a couple of different blogs I maintain on a regular basis that are focused primarily on mindfulness and keeping conscious reality creation and trying to do things for self-encouragement, because I hate the phrase self-help. And I've been starting to walk away from self-help lately, and it's really about self-encouragement. But then beyond that, I'm also a writer with several fantasy and fiction books under my belt, primarily fantasy sci-fi. I am in the middle of publishing multiple books in 2 different sci-fi series at the moment. I started them last year, and they've been a lot of fun to write, a lot of fun to try to get out there, and that's really been my biggest jam pretty much all my life. I love this whole sci-fi thing. I got into Star Wars when I was 5, and, it's been my thing, and today's actually the anniversary of Star Wars coming out, so that was, 44 years ago, so that's a thing.
That's what you said, man. If you follow your Twitter, and which I just did, and I retweeted 3 hours ago, you posted 1977. I was a mere 8 years old, but I remember I went to the theater and I saw this in the theater. I don't remember much of that first time out, but hand shot first, man. Hand shot first.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. They changed that completely. But okay, let's go with Star Wars, man. Since you're all things geekdom, and today being the anniversary of that great movie that changed many lives and guided people's lives. Did you see it in the theater when it first came out? How old a man are you?
I totally did. I am currently 48, so I was 5 years old when it came out. My parents took me to see it, and I just remember the awe that first time I saw that ship coming over my head and all the lasers blasting, and then the other bigger ship, big triangle coming over our heads, the Star Destroyer, and I went, whoa, this is so cool. And that was it. I was hooked. And I've seen Star Wars so many times at this point that I can't even count it. And that was the start of all my sci-fi love. It went from Star Wars to Star Trek to more modern stuff, Firefly and The Expanse, and just, wow, so much. And that's why I love writing this stuff, because it's just the coolest ideas. And I totally fell in love with it. And Star Wars has been my jam pretty much all my life. Yoda is my guru. So that's my Buddha is my Yoda. I quote him all the time. To my wife's chagrin, I often overquote him because he has the best lines. Come on. Do or do not. There is no try. That's the best. So, yeah, I'm totally a huge geek, and Star Wars has been a huge part of that for my entire life.
If my wife has said it 100 times, my life in a movie. Another movie quote, another movie line, and a lot of a lot of sci-fi. Terminator's probably my favorite movie of all time. One of the greats. That one, and between Terminator and The Highlander, those are the two biggest movies in my life. Soundtrack alone on Highlander, but Star Wars for sure. Star Wars versus Star Trek. That's been the age-old battle. But why can't it be both, man? Why can't we love both?
Which I do. I'm all for both. They're the best. I love both. I'm an equal opportunity sci-fi geek.
And get inspiration from both. Hey, speaking of geeks, let's give credit where credit is due. I want to give a shout out to Katrina Tehador, the geek unique cosplay, cos marketing guru. She's been really sending a lot of people my way that have been really interesting, and so far so good, man. Murray Blehart, you are a fascinating character. I'm looking at your background. I know you're a podcaster, and I want to put you on my pod feed. I listen to podcast about 8 hours a day. My day job is a driving job where I drive around all by myself in my van, just driving around. So I usually keep the extreme details of that job on the down low, but I do get to hear podcasts all day long. So I am going to put you in my feed. But what can I expect if I listen to your podcast, and what is the name of that podcast?
So the podcast is called Awareness for Everyone, and it focuses on the same stuff my blogs focus on, which is this concept that we are only here for a finite time in these bodies, but we are here, we exist beyond that, and we have all these great connections between other people, but also within ourselves. And people tend to be completely unaware of like everything, and people just don't know themselves. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what's going on. And I feel that if they had a little more awareness and they really thought about it and practiced some mindfulness, and I'm not talking like the buzzword, mindfulness, it changes everything. I'm talking really thinking about what are you thinking? What are you feeling? And asking themselves these things in the moment. That awareness really helps us all connect better, first to ourselves and then everybody else. So I really feel strongly about this, which is why I've been podcasting about this for, I think, about 2.5 years now. I started out doing it every other Friday, and now it's every single Friday. It usually posts somewhere between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m., depending on when I actually hit the button to remember to post it. I've been trying to be better about posting it around 9:30 Friday mornings, but it's always there, and I'm up to 108 episodes at the moment, I believe. And it's a real joy. I love doing this. I mean, I was a DJ in college. Mm-hmm. And that was like the thing I loved. I lived in the bloody radio station. That was like where I always was to be found. You probably understand this concept completely well. And look at that mic going, I've seen one of those. I know that mic. So, yeah,
sure.
That's a thing.
SM7B, man. Best of the best. No, I've been talking into Mike since 1986. I'm 52 years old myself. So we've eaten a lot of the same dirt, movie-wise and radio-wise. I got a cough, so I'm going to hit that cough button real quick.
Gotcha.
Technology. Now, the people listening to the audio version of this podcast will never hear that cough because I will cut out all the silence, all the dead noise and in the audio version. But the people watching the video version of this will get the sensation, the full bloody rawness. Now on your podcast, do you do guests, or is it all something that's scripted out on your own?
So it's actually, I give myself a basic outline, and then I go about 15 to 17 minutes just going through the concept and expressing the idea I've got for that week. And it's really just me. I haven't yet worked with anybody else. I've thought about it, and at some point I might bring somebody in to do that. But thus far, it's always been me, which is why I try to keep it under 20 minutes, because even I don't want to hear myself go for 20 minutes straight. And I really like to, because I keep it more improvisational, because I just have a basic outline, I talk through what comes through my head. I read years ago that that's really the best way to podcast. If you script this stuff, it becomes really obvious you're scripting it. And some people aren't very good at improv, which I get. I love improv. One of my specialties in theater in college was improv. So, it all kind of works.
Yeah, unless it's a podcast that's improv, scripting is not the way to go. People want to hear a raw version of a conversation. I hear a lot of, some of the best podcasts are edited, really edited. But the best of the best ones seem like the ones that are just flow easily. But have you had any radio training? Because I went to radio school back in '86 and then again in 2003 just to get all the electronic stuff, the new stuff, because I learned how to splice tape when I was a kid.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. So you have had some training. Tell me about your radio broadcasting.
Yeah, I went to Ithaca College, and I lived in the college radio stations, and I got trained. Audio production was my minor. I actually ran through all of the production. I was production manager my senior year, so I was living there, splicing everything, doing all of the PSAs and promos and recording them and editing them. And I have all that experience. And then all the digital equipment, I graduated college in 95. All the digital equipment started showing up in 96. We had one digital editor, and that was actually in the radio station. Or that was actually in the theater department. We had one digital station, and it got stolen about a month and a half after it arrived. And we're completely sure it was an inside job, but they never proved a thing. And that was it. And back then it was one Mac and it had about 20 minutes worth of space, and that was it. But this was also 1995, so the tech's gotten a lot better since then. And I got to tell you, editing in Audible, it's so easy. And so really, digital's great. Unlike cut and splice, where you've got that piece of reel that you've now messed up and you got to redo. When you're doing it with digital, you can go, hey, I'm going to hit that undo button and I'm fine. It's all good here. So, yeah.
Yeah, the audio version of this podcast will be in Adobe Audition, which was Cool Edit before when it started, and then the video version will be in XSplit, which is what you're currently seeing it on the Skype backwards. I assure you that it will be forwards when it's out on YouTube. But man, give me more of Murray Blehart. You're from New York or from New Jersey? Where did a young Murray start?
You want the best part is I'm not from either. I actually grew up in the suburbs of Minneapolis. So I was born out there.
So you and Prince and Kirby Puckett.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and Kirby Puckett. Yeah, I actually met Kirby Puckett once, long ago.
What?
So
tell me about you and the Kirby.
I was on a flight with him and most of the twins back somewhere around 89, somewhere in there, 88, 89. Yeah, I grew up in the burbs of Minneapolis, and my parents had divorced when I was like 6, and my dad moved to New York City. So I'd come out and visit him all the time, and he's like, you should check out the schools out east. And we went and looked initially at Cornell, which is where he went, and I said, hey, that's cool, but what about that other school on the hill over there? I want to check that one out. So I went to Ithaca and fell in love with the campus, and that's where I wound up. So I went to Ithaca, and then after the 4 years at school, I spent another year just living in Ithaca because it was a cool college town. I wound up in New Jersey somehow, and I've either lived since then in either New Jersey or Southern New York. And over the last 4 years, I actually moved from the northern part of Jersey. I now live in the southern part of Jersey. I've gone from being about 40 minutes from New York City to now I'm 20 minutes from Philadelphia. So
see, I know that's like a tri-state area. I hear about it. I really haven't been north of the Mason-Dixon. I know that's a very southern thing. I haven't been north of the Mason-Dixon. I'm born and raised in Miami, South Florida, the Florida Keys, and then moved out to Conway, Arkansas, where I currently reside, and that's where I hang my hat now. Kind of slowed down, but Conway, Arkansas is a college town, so I've kind of fallen in love with it as well. So I could see how you can fall in love with Ithaca, and kind of stay there. So when you were in Ithaca, what do you remember about Minnesota?
Oh, Minnesota was great. I mean, the only thing I don't miss at this point is the winters. Minnesota winters were brutal. I mean, you want to talk cold, that is some serious cold. I think in the 20 plus years I've lived here in either New Jersey or New York, this area, I think I've had 3 years I would call it actual winter, and the rest of the time was kind of winter-esque, because it's a thing. But Minnesota's beautiful. There's all these lakes, and they always joke about it. It's the land of 10,000 lakes, which is funny because it's actually more like 15,000 lakes. They're ridiculous. They're everywhere. Minneapolis itself has like 4 lakes in the city. So that's a thing. And there's some great space. It's beautiful, and it's a nice place to grow up, and it's a really progressive place. You don't think of it that way because it's still kind of the Midwest, but it's very progressive, and it's always been, I'm always proud of that being my heritage because it was just a neat place to be. It was a cool way to grow up. I've lost pretty much all the twang I had back when I lived there. I mean, I never sounded like Fargo. I mean, you got to live up into like the Iron Range that way. You got to go way up north. Got to be up there because like Fargo, which most people don't realize, is actually North Dakota.
Right.
Don't you know?
Right.
So yeah, but I've been out here so long at this point. It's like, yeah, that faded. Every now and then, my mom still has a little bit of a twang to her voice, to that slight accent, and she lives in Delaware now. So, because they got tired of Minnesota winters too.
No, I imagine so. It was there was ice and snow here for a week, and we lost our minds. There's only four snow plows in the whole city of Conway, Arkansas, and 3 of them broke down.
Right.
So we were having a tough time in 2 feet of snow. I could not imagine being in Minnesota. Now, hey, did you have any experience with Jesse the Brain?
I missed most of his stuff. I'd moved out of state by the time he was governor. I just remember watching one of the most fascinating things. I remember him when I was a kid because he was a big celebrity, and he was actually mayor of a town, one of the suburbs about 5 towns over from mine. It was actually part of the same school district I was in. So I never met him, but I, knew his story, and he was actually a pretty good mayor. And then when he served as governor, he turned out to be a surprisingly good governor. It was really one of those things. It's like, hey, he might be a celebrity, but he's got a clue. And,
Right.
I remember watching from Minnesota, from New York at that point. I was watching one of the debates between the Republican and the Democrat and Ventura answered the questions where the other guys just kind of attacked each other. And it was like, ooh, this is how the guy won. He actually makes sense. But he was always one of those Minnesota's got some interesting local celebrity types. You got Jesse the Brain. You got Prince. I've driven past Paisley Park. I'd never been there. And it was kind of a cool thing.
That it amazes me, but I figured Jesse the Ventura was a pretty no nonsense type of guy. Just straightforward, kind of like Arnold. And I don't think Arnold was particularly a great governor, but it was fat. He couldn't have done any worse than the one before him. I guess was
Right.
Gary, but was it Gary Johnson? Maybe that's what his name was. But
I can't remember.
Yeah, but I Predator, another great movie in my list of movies to watch. List of 100 movies that you have to see before you die is definitely
Right.
Predator. And I was kind of hopeful that every one of the characters would eventually become a governor of their own respective states. Waiting for Shane Black and Billy, I can't remember his name, but and maybe even Espelita, the girls. She could probably, and maybe even the Predator himself.
Sure.
I think was he a basketball player? He was a pretty tall guy, but no,
Yeah.
man, I'm having fun with you. But I was kind of interested, if you ever had any experience, because for me, Minnesota, the governor will always be Jesse the Brain, even if he's not. But so you got to Ithaca. That's your experience in Minnesota, but then you went to Ithaca from there, or is that where your dad lives? You kind of went and stayed with him for a little bit, or?
So my dad actually lived in New York City for quite a while, and then he moved out of the city because he got tired of apartment living and got himself a house in North Jersey, which is how I wound up in New Jersey, because I stayed with him for a couple months after I finally left Ithaca. I actually did all right, I'm starting college, I'm leaving home, and I packed it up and I moved halfway across country and never really looked back, because I never quite fit in Minnesota. I mean, there's a lot of 6 foot tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Scandinavians. I am not 6 feet tall, blonde-haired, or blue-eyed by any stretch of the imagination. So it was like I found my people, so to speak, and it always felt more right to be here on the East Coast. And I have been to 43 out of 50 states.
What?
Yeah, the only state on this side of the Mississippi I haven't actually been to is Kentucky. I've been to every other state on this side of the Mississippi River. And I think, I've only missed a couple other states. I haven't been to Alaska or Hawaii. I haven't been to Idaho. I haven't been to Utah and Montana. And I think that covers all the states. I've been to every other state at least once, at least briefly, and not just landing at the airport. I set foot in the state, spent a little time. But, and I really, there's something about this area, there's something about the East Coast that just always fit me. And this is home and has been now for a long time, even though I've shifted what part of this state I've lived in. I've been within 10 minutes of New York City as the crow flies, 45 minutes from New York City, but closer to the PA border. And now I'm 20 minutes from Philadelphia, but I'm still only about an hour and a half from New York City. If I can miss the traffic. So at about 3 a.m., if there's no construction, I can get there in an hour and a half.
Yeah, I tell everybody in their 20s, just after they get out of school, whatever school they're going to do, if they're going to go all the way to college or what have you, or if they want to take a gap year, there is so much to see in this country. Take a driving tour. I did it myself. When I got out of high school, maybe after my first or second year of college, I said, well, let me drive across country, and I went out 10 all the way to California, up the 101, and then up 15, and then across 40. And I guess 40 is around the Mason-Dixon line. I never went north of that, but I did touch a few states, and I was DJing parties for a singles group, and that's how I did my tour. I actually got paid to take a tour of the southern United States, and that was pretty fun. How did you end up touching 43 states?
So I've been just traveling over the years. I had my grandparents lived in Arizona when I was a kid. I had an aunt and uncle in Chicago, so I got to Illinois several times. And then driving from Minnesota to Ithaca, once I was a sophomore, I took my car with me. And so I at least paused in every one of the states, stopped through. So that was the north. And then somewhere around, I think it was 2007, I did a driving tour for 3 weeks where I took I-40 in one direction all the way to Arizona and I-20 in the other direction to head back. So I got to experience all these states, which, I got through Arkansas and I got through Alabama, Oklahoma, and Texas. Texas is huge. It takes forever to drive through Texas. It's insane. I spent a bunch of time in New Mexico because I had a friend there. I stayed with friends as much as I could on the route. I've got friends all over the country because of this medieval thing I've been doing for almost 30 years. That's why you see the swords back here. At least one of those is an actual, like a fencing sword. I use it in actual fencing practices. And I've been doing that for almost 30 years now. And so it always makes it easier to write when I'm writing fantasy stuff. If I'm writing about like sword combat, I actually know how these weapons work. I've used them. So it's kind of like I'm doing this from experience. I know how this weapon does work versus I can pretend. No, I've played with them. I kind of know how most of them work, and I've played with a wide variety of the weapons, which I totally just went tangent on you on that one, but it's a thing.
No, I love it. I love it completely. Murray Blehart, I'm going to agree with you on Texas. I took I-10. I started, East Texas to West Texas. It took forever, but I did stop in Austin and did a party there. So, yeah, I agree. And I did look at, was it Juarez, Texas, just over the border from El Paso. And I went, oh, okay, there's Mexico. Never stepped into Mexico. But those swords, man, I was looking at them, I was eyeing them, and it reminded me of the infomercials back in the day when the guys would be selling knives and swords on television, and it would be like, oh, $5.95 and $39.95, and I'm going to throw in this one and that one. Where did you get your swords?
So they've been collected over the years. Like the ones that I primarily fight with live in the back of my car in a big bag, because then I'll take them with me to practice, and they're all tipped. They're all edged, so none of them are sharp because we don't want to hurt our friends when we do this. I'm part of this medieval organization that's worldwide, and that's part of how I've met people all over the country, all over the world who play this game. And I've been doing this medieval style of fencing all this time. And a lot of my weapons have been acquired from makers that don't make them anymore. My primary swords were all made by people who don't make weapons anymore. There was a guy out here named Terry who made one of my swords. There's another guy named James from out in Arizona who made another one of my swords. And there's a couple of different suppliers who provide us with our weapons because they're not like modern fencing weapons. They're heavier. They're a lot closer to the real blade. But again, they're tipped, and we're really careful. We don't want to hurt our friends because, of course, if you hurt your friends, then you can't fight them anymore. And it's great exercise. It's a great martial art, and there's a lot of different forms and formats, and the weapons change around. And I mean, there's one of these things. This is a spear tip that will eventually be mounted onto a piece of rattan and used as a fighting spear, which will happen later in the week. I just haven't gotten around to putting them together. A friend of mine has the other pieces for me, but it's really cool, and you meet really interesting people that way. And there are events where we'll fight one-on-one, and then there's events where we'll fight 100 on 100, and it's like team combat. And that's the guys who fence. There's other guys who actually put on armor, and they'll put on pounds of armor and these heavy helmets, and they'll hit each other with rattan swords. And there are battles they do where there's like 1,000 on this side and 1,000 on this side, and a cannon goes off, and they all charge in the middle to kill each other. And it's the coolest thing.
Whoa. I mean, my life's in movies, but it's also in music videos. I'm remembering Def Leppard's Rock of Ages when Joe Elliott was struggling with that sword. I think the sword was taller than him. But I remember that vividly. And like I told you, one of my top 2 favorite movies is Highlander. And the swords in that, the way they talked about it, the way they talked about the katana. I went to a mall one time and I bought one of those 3 sets of katanas, and I had it up on my over my television for a little while and looking at it. And my brother-in-law, he seems to have absconded with them, but that's a whole other story. But what is the types of swords that you have right behind you? There's 2 of them that I can see.
So they're basically rapiers. So they're more of like a late 15th century weapon, sort of like, I'm trying to think where there's good, Princess Bride. Kind of like the swords that they fight with in the Princess Bride.
Wonderful.
They're very similar. I know this one's tipped. Pull one of these things. This one was I'm temporarily holding it because I won a tournament. So actually, it's not tipped. So, but if I rounded off this edge and then put a tip on it, I could actually fight with this one. These are a little longer than I typically fight with. A lot of times, there's a lot of different theories about the best way to do this, about the length of the weapon, that kind of thing. Rapiers tend to be slightly longer blades. They're usually around 39 to 40 inches long. I fight with a slightly shorter blade that's about 35 inches long. It's closer to a small sword. And historically, there's different time periods where, the different weapons, earlier period, the weapons were a lot heavier. Later period, they get lighter, and you get into the whole idea of what they refer to as the art of defense. Instead of hitting armor and shields, you actually went sword on sword, which eventually evolved into what we call today fencing. So, which is a very, very imperfect history, and I'm sure somebody will correct me that I got that wrong, but I've been studying this for a while, so it's not completely wrong. But it's really cool, and it's a lot of fun.
Hey, my listeners don't do any fact checking, and listeners, if you're going to Google that, do not do it. No fact checking here. No, this is all fun. No, but you mentioned Princess Bride, another great movie, man. And they, I know that it's been debunked, all the stuff that Inigo Montoya was talking about with the sword fighting and the different masters. Yes, those are real people. But him climbing on rocks and jumping off of things had nothing to do with their style. No. You've actually studied some of this stuff. You're not only writing about this, you've studied this. What kind of insight can you give me about Inigo Montoya's, I've studied Grapapa and Chapati, or whatever.
So their actual styles are not absolutely horrific. They're not the worst thing you've ever seen. Their footwork is not terrible. Their overall blade work is actually halfway decent. I mean, it's very show and go. It's a lot of slash, clash, banging noises. So a lot of it, that's stage fighting, though, but it's good stage combat. And all the masters they mention are real. Agrippa and Capoferro. And I mean, I've studied a little bit of Capoferro primarily because I studied Italian rapier with somebody who was the student of a living master. Because they're still out there. There's still people who teach this stuff. And it was really, it's neat. And it's a good fight. I mean, it's definitely silly at various points, but it's not the worst sword fight ever. Their footwork isn't bad. Their everything they do is halfway decent. It's like, it's very clear they studied what they were doing to actually do it pretty much right. So got to give Mandy Patinkin and Cary Elwes credit for that. Because, those guys rocked it.
Yeah,
great fight.
I can imagine. Yeah, stage fighting has got to be a lot of clanging and a lot of twirling the sword around and making sure that the blade hits the light properly so the camera can catch it. But are you making videos of these? And what's the name of the group that you're in that's worldwide or nationwide you're?
The group is called the Society for Creative Anachronism. If you look up sca.org. They are worldwide. They have been around for over 50 years. We divide the world, we refer to it as the known world, and it's divided into currently 20 kingdoms. And the kingdoms span different amounts of area. For example, the entirety of Australia is a kingdom. The Kingdom of the East stretches from Delaware all the way up to Prince Edward Island. With like a chunk of, it's part of New York, part of Pennsylvania, but not all of them. And we're huge, both geographically and population-wise. And they all, there are people who've been doing this for a lot longer than I have, and I'm approaching 30 years since I started doing this. But I've met a guy at this one event I go to most summers from Australia who I've gotten to fence multiple times, and he's a trip. And it's all ages, it's all genders, everybody plays. There are lots of people who are, men and women fight each other. Gender non-binary people fight with us. There's no difference. We don't distinguish that kind of thing. The only real difference is age. There's rules about fighting anybody under the age of 18 in some states. In some states, they actually allow the 14-year-olds to fight in with the adults. So we're cautious. We want to make sure nobody gets hurt. That's one of our big things. But we also want to be as inclusionary as possible. And it's neat. And you really meet some of the most interesting people this way. And this was why when I did my huge driving tour, I had a friend to stay with in New Mexico. I had a friend to stay with in Atlanta, because these are people I'd known for years doing this game, and they're always the most opening, welcoming people, and it's just we're kind of. We share this idea, this love of medieval history, which is a big part of it, and we span a huge time period. I mean, we span basically the fall of the Roman Empire to the death of Elizabeth I. So you're talking 1,600 years almost of time, and it's amazing. And you get people who dress in like the full-on Elizabethan, and then you get people who dress in like late period Roman. And they mix it up, and you're all together at these events, and sometimes the weapons forms mix up. I know a guy who fences in a completely Japanese fencing kit, complete with a rapier katana, which is the coolest weapon to fight with. I need to get one for myself because it is so much fun to fight with. But we do this. It's a hobby, It's kind of like the Ren Fair, except instead of being performers, we're doing this for our own edification. This is our own entertainment, and it helps inspire the rest of the work I do. I mean, as a writer, I got great fodder for this, and all these people have a lot of the same imagination. They're a great audience for this type of stuff, and while it doesn't always tap into the sci-fi, it taps into the rest of it, which, and a lot of them are sci-fi fans like I am, and we talk all this stuff offline when we're not at events and stuff. So it's a very cool experience, and yeah, I've missed it terribly during the pandemic because we've all been, shut out because we needed to be. And we're just starting to reopen practices and start considering events. So just starting to get back into this stuff, which I'm really looking forward to.
Well, I love how you light up, man, just talking about this community that you're involved in. You've developed friendships and real solid friendships. I can tell by the way you're talking about it all over this country and possibly all over the world. But one of my favorite places to eat in Orlando was Medieval Times. And this is just after I got married. I got married in kilt because I'm half Irish and half Cuban. So I wore an Irish national kilt when I got married, and my hair was down past my shoulders, so I had it braided Braveheart style. I had green ribbons and white ribbons, and my brother very similar, but he's my half brother, he's half Scottish, so he had a Scottish I think he had a kilt. I don't remember if it was his name, but notwithstanding, he also had braids in his hair as well. But Medieval Times was great. They had the sword fighting as well, and you had to pick a team. That's another thing. When you were talking about mixing all these different styles and different time variants in your battles, some people would be so strict. I know I've dealt with people that do like Civil War reenactments, and if their stuff is not to par, and even stormtroopers. Oh my goodness. Talk about people that are so meticulous. The 501 stormtroopers.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, dealing with them, at different Comic-Cons. If their stuff is not up to par, no. Get out of here with that fake stuff. No, you got to have the right stuff. But you go for different times, over the centuries, really. How does that bode? Is there a master at your reenactments, or is there any like structure, I guess?
It's not, like I said, we really try to keep it within that specific almost 1,000-year period, basically, and there really isn't much of a set structure. And I mean, you do get some worldwide ideas. There are people who do Persian, there are people who do the Japanese, the Chinese, a lot of Indian-inspired stuff. A lot of people do different personas, different connections, and some of them do historic based on their own families, historic on their own loves, whatever they're into, that kind of thing. We all have personas, and so we take on this idea, and some people have multiple personas depending on what garb you're wearing. And if it's, I have one persona if I'm Roman and one persona if I'm going to do the Elizabethan thing today. And some people will change it up depending on what they're wearing. Some people will change it up depending on what event they're taking part in. Because, I mean, in addition to the combat, you get people who do all these other arts and things. And there are people who do these beautiful scrolls and calligraphy and illumination, and they do great stuff for giving awards. There are people who cook in medieval styles. They redact old recipes and stuff. There are people who do medieval dancing. My wife does medieval research. My wife is probably one of the leading authorities on what people used prior to toilet paper, because she fell down a rabbit hole looking at something completely different and went, hey, what did they use before toilet paper? And started doing all this research and has become like a leading authority on this idea because she's like, this is really cool. She does what they call the dirty arts, because not very many people look into this stuff. They all want to do pretty and, nice garb and pretty scrolls. And she's like, no, I want to look at what do these people do to wipe their butts with. It's fascinating stuff because it's still part of the history. So you get a really wide mix, and you get a lot of academic types, and then you get a lot of computer tech types, a lot of teachers, and then you got everything else. You got every walk of life. There are doctors, lawyers, you name it, they do this. Writers like me. It's a crazy mix, but it's really cool because you really do get an interesting and broad swath of people doing this. So and like I said, it's totally worldwide, and it's pretty amazing.
Hey, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, what do they wipe their butts with?
Depending on the time period and where you were, I believe there was a period in England when they were using old linen that they discarded. They were using, I don't want to say steel wool. There's the myths about leaves, which are not entirely proven. There's a whole idea that the Romans used a sponge on a stick type thing, which, not my area of expertise, but I totally support my wife's research because it's super cool and it makes people go, that's neat. I never thought about that, but she did. And she's like, that's really, it's different.
Well, you mentioned The Princess Bride earlier, and I did send you a friend request on Facebook, and I noticed there was a meme there of goals, relationship goals, and I encourage people to find Murray Blehart on the Facebook and find that meme. It's good. Yeah, have fun storming the castle.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, that is my wife and I. We will someday be. We already are. Max and Valerie will complete. We throw that line at each other all the time. It's kind of a thing.
Well, it sounds like you found your Adam's rib, man. It sounds like you found a person that's with you. Does she go with you on these battles, or is she a part of this?
She is. She comes with me sometimes to events. I brought her into this. I dragged her into this game when I met her. She was like, okay, that sounds cool. And then I brought her into it, and she went, okay, this is kind of cool. And my friends became her friends, and we really blended it well because it was the kind of thing she needed. When we first met, she was like, you're the most unapologetic geek I've ever met. And I said, yes, thank you. I quote movies all the time, and she's like, why do you remember that stuff? And I don't know. It's just in my brain. It's terrible. It's the amount of things that I carry around that have no use whatsoever to me, but there they are. So
yeah, I heard you say, and now for something completely different when you were given an account. Yeah, okay, Monty Python, I get it. And they had sword fights as well, which kind of blends into this kingdom that you're involved in. Now, on a personal note, Murray Blehart, what is your area of expertise? What do you dress up as when you're doing the sword fighting? Is it the full knight in shining armor, or is it another version of it?
So I'm more of a right now I'm kind of in a weird middle spot with my garb. I used to do more of a Elizabethan type of persona. I was in a doublet and tunic. So I have a helmet that is one of a kind. It is a somewhere between a Spangan helmet and a kabuto. So it looks somewhere between like a Japanese helmet and a medieval helmet, just because it looked cool when we designed it. A friend and I designed it. It's made out of leather. It's one of a kind. My current garb is more of a kind of early period. Shouldn't say early period. I don't know what my garb currently kind of fits as. I've gotten to the point where it's like, well, it's comfortable and it's good for fighting in. When I'm in my more courtly stuff, it's more towards the Elizabethan with a few. I don't wear the closed doublet very often because I don't find them terribly comfortable a lot of the time. But yeah, I have most of my good dress garb is the medieval stuff. Is the Elizabethan type of stuff. So very later period, post late 1500s type of stuff like you'd see from like Shakespeare in Love, that kind of stuff.
I know Shakespeare is around 1600 in that area. Elizabethan is late 1500s.
Yep, Elizabethan is.
I'm a fan of history too.
Listen, about 1550 to I think it's a little later than that, but it goes until 1603, which is when she passed.
And Shakespeare was just beginning and getting into his really good. No, he was really into it.
Yeah, that was right in the middle of his stuff.
Heyday.
Yeah, Shakespeare came on the scene. I want to say the 1590s, 1580s, somewhere in there. But yeah, all of his main stuff was in the 1590s. So that's when he was really a character. And I've always said my persona is 1600s, late 1600s English. So I would have been part of that period, I would have been viewing the plays at the Globe. That's always been the thing. We don't, unlike Ren fairs, we don't put on airs. We don't do the whole, faux accent thing. We don't gussy up the language to try to make it sound like, tuppence for the Lord. What does the king want today? Right? I can talk like this all I want. Unfortunately, it'll make my friends beat me with a stick because it's ridiculous. So we talk like ourselves. And yeah, I mean, it's. I'm trying to think the best way to explain my own persona. Recently, I switched over my armor, so we have to have a certain layer of armor to, protect us if a blade were to break on us, because these swords do break occasionally. I started wearing chainmail. It's a very lightweight chainmail armor under whatever shirt I'm wearing, but it's so light. You would think it's heavier, but it's much lighter and it breathes. It's great in 90-degree heat because air just moves right through it. It's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Man, so I've seen these cats, and the only really Ren fairs that I've been to are the ones in South Florida. I cannot imagine. Here I am, the most I've ever done was wear a kilt and maybe a Jacobite shirt, and I'm real comfortable. But these guys are wearing, full garb, wearing the full chainmail with the armor over the top. I can't imagine. They must be cooking like potatoes in there. But they go for it, and they're wholehearted. As much as I'm hearing from you, to where you have this instilled in your head, and you have this love for what you're involved in. I'm feeling it from you. I'm getting the excitement, the vibe from you. It's exciting. And I did go to I went to the Spanish monastery down in Miami, and they had I did a wedding down there. And it was all medieval. They had, jugglers and jesters, and they really did it all just right, But the music was heavy metal. Does that kind of jibe when you think about people that like that kind of thing, or is it a lot of heavy metal, or what kind of music are you into?
I've seen Knight's Tale, and they're all doing all the joustings to the heavy metal into the classic rock. I'm a classic rock guy. That's from my college DJing days. I'm a '90s rock guy. I love my grunge. I've always been a big fan of Pearl Jam and Eddie Vedder, and I got into Bare Naked Ladies in college because they were around then, and love my Canadians. Those guys are great, and they're like the best live show. I've seen them live 8 times, and they're amazing every single time, and they're always different, and they have the most energy when they're on the stage, and it's the coolest thing. But yeah, I'm an old rock guy. That's always been my jam, but I also am into a little bit of jazz, a little bit of Broadway show tune type stuff. When I write, I tend to use movie soundtracks. Like, love the stuff, John Williams soundtracks. You hear the opening bars of Star Wars, you're in. And I love that stuff. And, I always say Michael Giacchino's kind of become he's sort of the newest, he's the new John Williams. He's doing everything. He's scoring all the new stuff, and he's amazing. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right, but the guy's great. I love his work. He did the new Star Trek, and he's done a lot of that stuff. So, I have a very wide musical taste, but rock's always been my first love.
Well, as a DJ would, and classic rock is great, but a good ska band with one of the greatest band names. If you want to get a poster, Bare Naked Ladies, yeah, I'm kind of interested in that. I'm a man, a heterosexual man. That would get me in the door. Oh, it's a ska band.
That's why they chose the name in the first place.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Yeah. But all right, now we've got a little broad strokes of what your inspiration is. Let's get into what are you writing, man? You're making you had Star Wars in your background, a little Monty Python, a little Princess Bride. What's inspiring the worlds that you're creating, and when did this start?
So I started writing when I was 9. Because Star Wars totally was one of the big influences. And I wrote, when I was 9 years old, this 50-page illustrated story I called Wildfire. And it was the story of how the kids of the world were put out when the adults decided to have these robots built that took over everything. And the kids rebel, steal a bunch of secret weapons, build themselves a fortress in the Grand Canyon. They carve out a section of the Grand Canyon to build their fortress, and then they do strikes against the robots to try to take them out, and eventually the adults get involved with the robots, and in the end, the kids overthrow all the robots and all the adults and take over the world. And I'm really glad no child psychologist ever got a hold of this thing, because I'm pretty sure they locked me up for that craziness. But that kept on influencing. I wrote a lot of other stuff along the way from there. And then somewhere around 1998, I started this fantasy series because I'd gotten all into Tolkien and I was into, I loved Game of Thrones. I figure we're never going to see the end of the books. He's never finishing. Just sorry, George. George R. R. Martin's never finishing those books.
Man, I've never seen one episode of Game of Thrones. I don't have the HBO. I need to get it. But go ahead.
It was worth it. It was cool. But and if you're looking for good, I'm currently watching Shadow and Bone. We started watching that, and
Netflix,
it's pretty
right?
good.
I think that's on Netflix.
Yeah, that's Netflix.
Yeah, that just came up on my feed. I think I'm going to step into that.
It's been cool so far.
Okay.
So
Thank you
I
for
started
the
getting
tip.
into fantasy, and I started my fantasy series in '98, and then I got a professional editor who taught me 1,001 things, not just about editing, but about my writing process, and totally changed it so that I was doing a much cleaner write and thinking more in terms of, well, whose point of view am I writing from, and focusing on, okay, if I'm in this point of view, I don't want to leap to somebody else's point in the middle. And so I started writing this fantasy, and I'm 2 books into this series. Eventually, the 3rd book, my wife is harassing me every day for the 3rd book. It's done. I'm still editing it again before I send it to my professional editor, because I always go through my own edits. But my main focus over the last year has been 2 new series. And the first one is very Star Wars influenced. It takes place in another galaxy. It's got humans that are not from Earth. Earth is not our home world. Nobody knows what the home world is. I know, but I'm supposed to know. But there's all these different alien races, and basically there is a race of aliens that have appeared from the void between galaxies, and they're attacking for a reason nobody understands, and that's part of what we're trying to figure out. Was why are they attacking? What do they want? Why are they doing the damage they're doing? And then another race shows up that is affiliated with everybody that's out there, and so you got all these different races, and it's a very alien-centric, weird sci-fi. It almost goes so far as to call it sci-fantasy. I'm playing with a couple of the standard sci-fi tropes and throwing them out the window. A couple of my characters don't match like the normal things that you would see in a sci-fi story. One of my main characters is, totally gender non-binary. Like, the alien race has no gender at all. They spawn via parthenogenesis. I actually had to look this up to understand it. And so I play with that kind of thing, and it's very what I call sci-fantasy, which is, more like Star Wars, in that the faster-than-light travel is via hyperspace, which, not really going to work that one out scientifically. It's a lot of fun. I loved the story when I started writing it, and it started off as a super long story that I started breaking into books. And book 4 comes out in October. That's when I'm releasing it. And book 5 is the only one I haven't written yet. I'm going to write it for next year. And then I started another series at the end of last year because I had this idea based in something from Star Wars, actually, because there was the whole Clone Wars idea. And originally, when they mentioned the Clone Wars in the first movie, when Obi-Wan's like, yeah, I fought in the Clone Wars like your dad, it's like, what's the Clone Wars? And then Lucas gave us this vision of the Clone Wars that I'm like, really? Clones versus robots? I thought it was going to be clones versus clones and be this weird thing. So I thought, hey, what if you had a war fought clones versus clones, and then once the war is over, you've got 100,000 clones with nothing to do? They were built for combat. Well, what do they do now? And that was the inspiration for Forgotten Fodder, which a good friend of mine, my friend Danielle, helped me name. She came up with the series name for me. And I was like, yeah, this is cool. And so the story is these clones who've basically been discarded, and they're basically second-class citizens. They're the underclass of the world. One of them witnesses a murder. And it's not a murder so much as an execution, and the investigator from the intergalactic, it's basically a spacefaring FBI instead of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It's the Confederation Bureau of Investigation in the colonies, way out in space. And it's this investigation of this murder, which turns out to be this whole conspiracy, and there's 4 books covering this conspiracy. Book 2 comes out June 20th. I'm in the process now of finishing up my edits, and I'm actually recording this series as an audiobook as well. Book 1, which is called Unexpected Witness, which I so happen to have a copy of, because one should always, share their stuff. This is Unexpected Witness. It is book 1 of the Forgotten Fodder series. It's available in Kindle, audiobook, and paperback via Amazon, because Amazon's the place for all this kind of stuff. And it's really been fun to explore this idea of, well, okay, so what happens with this clone who, while he's part of this investigation, is still basically being harassed everywhere he goes, ignored, told off because nobody wants clones around. Somebody likes clones because they fought this war that did a whole bunch of damage and then were just sort of left and nobody knew what to do with them. And their only real marketable skills are their military talents. And instead of, like with the Clone Wars, you got one clone that's like everybody.
Right.
There's 14 clones. There's actually 20 clones between the two sides that fought the battle. And there's a lot of questions about the fact that, their techniques were almost exactly identical. And it's almost like the cloning was like really what it was about, not the battle. So that's part of the conspiracy. And it's a lot of fun to write. And I wrote it from a perspective I've never done before. There's a friend of mine years ago explained there's two kinds of writers in the world. There are pantsers and plotters. Pantsers write by the seat of their pants. You get an idea, you sit down, you type it out, and then you just keep going. Planners, will plan out this idea, and they start doing all the world building, and sometimes they even go so far as to plan it out chapter by chapter. They do each book and have it ready to go. For this series, for Forgotten Fodder, I actually planned it out. And so I had the first 4 books all plotted. I had them named and ready to go. And when I started writing them, it was like, ooh, now the story's real. And I came up with this fantastic story. It was just so much fun to write. And I like this series so much that I'm actually currently plotting at least 3 more books that I'm going to try to get out next year. Because I write, daily. I'm writing every single day. And it's great. I just love doing this. And right now I'm plotting this one out. And I'm plotting a whole new series that I'm hoping to put out next year as well, in yet another galaxy, in yet another, future. And it covers a lot of different stuff. So yeah, I've kind of got my Star Wars and my Star Trek, for lack of a better explanation, since Forgotten Fodder is 500 years into our future, and Void Incursion, which is the other series, is that other galaxy. So... And as you can tell, I have a lot of passion about this stuff. 'Cause I love this.
Goodness, I've never written a book, let alone 4 books. Come on, man. And then you still have other books still in that noggin, in that gray matter, still swirling around. And you say plotting. Are you making an outline? 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe making the titles of the chapters?
So my chapters don't get titles because, man, that's a lot of work. But each chapter is numbered, and I know what it's going to include. And I've started actually, when I plot it, figuring out whose perspective I'm telling it from. Because the way I always looked at my characters and the way I tell stories is I'm the camera looking over this guy's shoulder here. And then maybe in the middle of the chapter, I jump to this guy's shoulder over here. Or I start a new chapter and I'm looking over this other person's shoulder and I'm tailing it from a whole other perspective, which was part of what my first editor taught me was, keep it to the one perspective and don't jump between characters in one scene, because while that's a very good thing to do in movies, it doesn't work for a reader when you're trying to write a book. So that's become part of the planning process. So yeah, I plot these things out. I got the chapter. I do a basic outline of the chapter, almost no dialogue. I don't figure any of that stuff out. I give myself a good outline to work from, and then the story just writes itself as I sit down and actually start writing. And sometimes the outline was a good idea, and I come up with a better idea as I'm writing and shift it to a slightly different place. Like I had a whole scene in the 4th book of the series that got completely rewritten, and I sat down writing it because the character had evolved in such a way that the scene didn't make sense the way I planned it, but it was easy to shift it to make sense. So it still stayed true to what the idea was, which made it a lot easier to do some foreshadowing, which has been great doing this new series because stuff I put in the first 4 books will pay out a bit in the next set of books.
Okay, you're leading me to believe that they're all in the same universe, whether the timeline is going. They could still intertwine, possibly time travel.
Well, not so much in the one series, but yeah, and that's the problem with having 2 separate series. And actually, when I start the 3rd series, having 3 separate sci-fi series, and the one series is, 550 years in our future. The new series I've started playing with is about 3,000 years into the future. And then the other series is that galaxy far, far away, my Star Wars, my bizarre space that doesn't exist where humans are not from Earth, that kind of thing. And, part of the upside to planning all this stuff out is I can write down things so I don't intermix. Like, some of the technology is very different in each world. Like for the 500 year in the future, for the Forgotten Fodder series, their faster than light travel is done via warp drives, very similar to the current science behind the notion of an Albuquerque, I always get his name wrong, but the Albuquerque warp drive idea. which was proposed a few years ago that they've been playing with, and they might actually be able to make plausible. So it's kind of cool. But
wait, Albuquerque, this is a real dude. This is the first I'm hearing of it. You're teaching me stuff.
Yeah, it was a physicist who actually proposed a way that a warp drive could work. The biggest issue is power, because it would require an amount of power to make it work that we currently don't have. I mean, we're talking, hypothetical power like dark energy and dark matter, that kind of thing, which there's some other studies now that are finding there might be a way to get around that. So they're playing with the idea, and you basically warp space-time in such a way that you kind of bend it and can move through it faster than light. And it's fascinating stuff. And still, you gotta account for the physics as we know them. But as we're always fond of looking at with science, the physics do change a bit over time, because, hey, wait, we just proved that theory and found that, no, this was actually more right than that, or, whatever. So, but I try to, with the one series I'm trying, for Forgotten Fodder, I'm trying to stay in a little bit of a more realistic, plausible sci-fi. I mean, I'm not going as hardcore as, say, The Expanse, which, wow, that is some serious, that the plausibility of that is amazing. And I mean, I'm not at the level of like Andy Weir and The Martian, where, oh yeah, completely doable. There's nothing there that's beyond, we could totally do a Mars mission the way he talks about.
Okay.
But I'm trying to stay on that line with that series, whereas with Void Incursion, no, I'm totally off in my own fantasy sci-fi world.
No, I haven't seen The Expanse, but I've seen The Martian, and yes, where it's kind of an Apollo 13 type of thing, using the items that he's got to makes it more plausible. Hey, that's a real dude on this far off land trying to make do with what he's got. But man, all these worlds you're building, it's amazing that the thoughts you have can go down on paper. And did you read the audiobooks yourself?
I've been reading the audiobooks myself, yeah.
Oh, I love that. That you've been dictating them. Because me, even though I like holding a book, I don't have a lot of time to read a book. But an audiobook, for sure. That'll be on my Christmas list coming up with to get your book into my head. But my goodness, man, Murray Blehart, you're a fascinating dude, man. And you've already got 2 books out now, right?
So believe it or not, I actually have a grand total of 11 books out, available on Amazon. I've got the 2 fantasy books. I've got in there, it's called The Source Chronicles. It's the series I've been working on. It's my fantasy series, it's a whole other world. I've got 1 steampunk novel out that I did several years back. 2 short stories published in a couple of anthologies that were actually where I started getting published. And then I've got the first 3 books in Void Incursion, which is the one sci-fi series I'm working on. And the first book of Forgotten Fodder is currently out. The second book's coming next month. I'm putting out 3 more books in addition to that before the end of the year. It was 6 books are what I plan to publish this year. The upside to self-publishing is that I can do this at my pace, which this year is a breakneck, am I out of my mind pace. The plus side is all the books I've written for this year, they're all done. I just have to edit. I'm either going through my edits and or going through what my editor does once she sends it back to me, and I go, okay, I'm agreeing with this part of your edit. I'm not agreeing with this part of your edit. It's like, that was a good idea on your part. I should have thought of that myself, which is why you get professional editors, because they catch stuff that you don't. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. If you look me up on Amazon as MJ Blehart, that's how you find me on Amazon. That's how you find me on Twitter and Instagram as well. Not to self-promote, but I'm going to self-promote here.
No, please do. Tell the people how to find you. Yeah, please.
Yeah. So I'm on Amazon as MJ Blehart. You can see the spelling of my name here if you're on the video. Otherwise, it's B as in boy, Lehart. I am the only one. You will find, there's all my stuff there. I've got a couple of nonfiction works out as well, talking about the mindfulness, conscious reality, creation, self-encouragement stuff I play with. I also have a couple of blogs I post to regularly. My website, mjblehart.com, features links to pretty much everything. It's got a good listing of my books. It's got a few other little tidbits in there of my existence. I'm all over the internet. You do Google, it's amazing. I've Googled myself, and I'm kind of in a lot of different places, and it's kind of weird sometimes because I sort of built myself as 3 separate personas, as, MJ and Murray, and then this medieval persona I have. And it sometimes causes a bit of an identity crisis, but most of the time I'm pretty centered. I know where I'm at. So, and I love doing this. I love this work. I love writing. I love being able to do the podcast. I love these types of interviews because, this is fun. It's an opportunity to talk and just really, express what the hell I'm doing. And it's a lot of stuff. And I'm really proud of the work I'm putting out there. So I love any chance I get to share it.
Yeah, as long as you like yourself and you like what you're doing, and the wife likes you, and I think those are the only people you really have to please. And then hopefully, if you like what you're writing, somebody else is going to like it too. When I'm putting stuff on RadioWhat.com, hey, what kind of music do you play? Well, I play the music I want to hear. And usually that's a lot. You say you had eclectic taste. Yeah, RadioWhat.com is a lot. But I found you on Twitter. I retweeted quite a few things, especially the Star Wars thing. That was kind of fun. That today is the anniversary. How great that we're talking on the anniversary of the original Star Wars. Now, as we're winding this thing down, I'm thinking about George Lucas and his writing style. The rumor was that he barely had enough money to make A New Hope, and it really wasn't called A New Hope at the beginning. It just occurred to him afterwards to rename it. Is that your understanding? And then all the things that were mentioned in the original Star Wars movie in 1977 is where the offshoots have come out, such as the Clone Wars and the, were those people, Mos Eisley and all these different places. Did you think that he had it all mapped out, or was that a one-shot deal that happened to turn into an amazing?
So the story had always been that he had 9 stories planned, that he had actually mapped out the prequels, the sequels. He had 9 ideas, and he started in the middle because it just, for whatever reason, made more sense to him to start. If he actually did it by the seat of his pants and made it up, I wouldn't be at all surprised, because God knows I've done it. I know where that comes from. The fantasy series I've talked a little bit about, the Source Chronicles. Book 1 is called Seeker. Originally, book 1 was called Seeker of the Source, and it was a slightly different book. It started in a completely different place from where it currently starts, before my professional editor went, all right, we got to clean this up and make it a little better than it is, because right now you're writing like an amateur and you need to make this more professional. And as I've been editing the 3rd book, I can see where in the middle of the 3rd book I'd started working with my editor, because it takes this shift in tone. And so I totally think Lucas, yeah, he probably made parts of it up. He probably had like a general outline of, all right, so this is how this thing's going to start, and this is where it's going to go, and Jedi are going to be like this. But no, Jedi are going to be like this, which is why you get the whole idea of Revenge of the Jedi versus Return of the Jedi. Hey, I had, when I was, 10, I had a comforter on my bed that was labeled as Revenge of the Jedi. So as much as he tries to claim that wasn't a thing, it was totally a thing. I remember it. Yeah. I remember the Star Wars special, which nobody wants to remember, but the Star Wars Christmas special, I have vague memories of it. It's still awful.
I just watched it. I just watched it at Christmas. Yeah. Yeah. I had nothing better to do, and I did.
The new one's great. The Lego one they did, the new one's fantastic. That was brilliant.
I haven't seen that. Wait. Oh yeah. Where do you find that? They did a
new Lego Star Wars Christmas special this year on Disney Plus. It's genius. It's absolutely fantastic.
Man, Murray Blehart, you have mapped it out. If anyone has any doubts whether it was going to be a one-shot deal, you already have 16 or so out there. There's already a bunch of books out on Amazon ready for them to consume. And I've talked to a lot of musicians and movie makers and authors, and it's the editor that really helps a discerning ear. A person who's unbiased. These people that have done, and I'm glad you're giving credit where credit is due. If you want to give shout outs to the people that have helped you along the way, this is your chance to do that as we wind this thing down.
Yeah, I mean, I've had 3 great editors. My first one was a woman named Luna Jensen. She was amazing. She taught me not just how to edit, she made me a much better writer. She taught me how to be an editor. I am a halfway decent editor now because of her, and I have a much better writing approach from it. My second editor was a gentleman named Paul, and I'm sorry, Paul, I'm totally blanking on your last name, Paul Martin, who I used for several of my books, and he did a great job on a lot of my middle work, a lot of the stuff I've been doing. And I have a new editor named Rebecca Becker, who I've been using for the last 3 books, and she is amazing. I love that I found her on Fiverr, Fiverr.com of all places, and she's just been a fantastic editor to work with. And I mean, without these people and their support, what I do isn't going to hit. It's not going to do what it needs to do because you need the editors. And I got a few friends who've been beta readers for me and helped me out. And my wife Christine has been just fantastic in supporting this stuff and helping me to realize my vision with this work and to be able to work full-time doing the writing these days, because that's what I've been focused on for the last year, just really putting all this stuff out there and getting my name out, because this has been my goal. This has been my dream since my childhood. And rather than just, well, maybe I'll do it, it's no, I'm writing books and I'm putting them out. And the other people I think are my friends. I cannot thank my friends enough for helping me, supporting me, and my readers. If anybody's actually listening to this that reads my stuff, I love you guys. I can't do this without people reading my work, and they're the best because I'm a reader. I love the stuff I read. I love reading. I spend an hour every morning reading. That's like first thing in the morning. I get out of bed, I read for an hour, and I love that. And I encourage people to do the same thing. And so I love the support I get, and I love to support the people I'm reading. And yeah, we need our fans if we're going to do this stuff. We do it for ourselves, but we do it for them. And without people interested in this stuff, then you're shouting in an empty room, which I can do all day long, because clearly I'm a talker. But what's the point talking to myself all day long? It's much more fun to share this stuff with other people.
Well, Murray MJ Blehart, the mjblehart.com. Man, you put a smile on my face throughout this interview, and I've just had a lot of fun talking to you. I know we've only scratched the surface, the tip of the iceberg. I encourage people to go to your website and find out a whole lot more about you. And I really got to find the audio versions of those books and put you into my 8 hours of driving every day. Oh, my goodness. So, all right, I usually finish these things off. Are there any other avenues you want to explore, you want to tell people about as we wind it down?
So like I said, I've got the second book in Forgotten Fodder called The Clone Conundrum is coming out on June 20th. It's currently available via Amazon for Kindle pre-order. It'll be available Kindle paperback, and then the Audible audiobook sometime soon. That the audiobooks are a little harder to predict time-wise for when they get released. The fourth book in Void Incursion, called Anti-Positional Moves, is coming out in October. And then books 3 and 4 of Forgotten Fodder are also coming out this year. Book 3, which is Unraveling Conspiracy, is coming out in August. Book 4, which is, I just lost my mind. Bold Moves, the final book in this section of the series, is coming out in November, because I'm insane and it's a lot of work. But this series it's a lot of fun, and it's something else. And the third book in the sci-fi, in the fantasy series, which I talked about a little bit, which is Source Chronicles. The third book, Harbinger, is coming out in 2022. I don't have a set time yet exactly, but that's when I'm releasing it after all these years, which will make my wife super happy and a few other people who've been waiting for it really happy. And look for Savage Space. That's the series I'm starting next year. I'm super psyched about it because I'm doing something that I thought somebody must have done before that they haven't. So I'm kind of excited about that. So this is going to be fun.
So well structured, man. And on top of that, you have a podcast every Friday that gets released.
Yep.
See, I'm terrible with these podcasts. I'm learning more and more from talking to other podcasters. I need to release them once a week. No, I release them about an hour after I'm done with them, and I just put them out there. I don't want people to have to wait another week. No, I'll have this out probably an hour after we're done talking, and this is great. But I know I don't want this to be the last time that we chat. As things progress, when you have more books that are coming out, or more whatever, more stories to tell, I encourage you to come back. But I usually like to finish these things off with last words for the people. Now, I want you to give last words for the people. This could be words to live by, something you heard a long time ago, or maybe maybe a mantra that you wake up with, and you look in a mirror and you say something to yourself, or just whatever pops into your head at this moment in time. Murray Blehart, last words for the people.
So I'm going to give you the mantra that I've been saying to myself for the last year. This is part of an affirmation I tell myself on a regular basis. And I think that it's something that a lot of people could relate to, which is a combination of a couple of different movie quotes and one of my favorite authors being Paulo Coelho. And it's this: the fear of suffering is worse than the suffering itself. I gain more than I lose when I act upon my dreams. Fear is the mind killer, and I am not afraid. Do or do not, and remember, there is no spoon.
Well, there you have it, party people. Murray MJ Blehart. Man, I knew that was going to be fun. The man's a geek, an unapologetic geek. And he's been geeking it since way back when, baby. Way back. Since Star Wars. Yeah, 5 years old. A tender age of 5. He got inspired by George Lucas, just like many of us did at an early age. And he built his own world. Hey, you know what? I can do that. Built his own world. I encourage you to check out mjblehart.com. And if you don't know how to spell it, check out the show notes. And I have it linked right there. So excited to get to know him even better. I'm going to follow him around on his various socials and learn more about Murray MJ Blehart. Fascinating person. Well, as you can see, I'm getting a little hoarse. So before I lose all my air, I want to invite you, yes, you, to tell your story. And give me a call at 501-470-6386 or email info@radiowhat.com. That's it for this edition of What Makes You Famous. It's Keys Dan, radiowhat.com, djlittlerock.com. Peace. I'm out of here.